There was just for those in last week's share, there was an interesting case on the news last couple of days in Israel. There was a whole talk about it this morning. They're indicting, they're taking under investigation a high-ranking um, police officer who's in charge of investigations, but because of something, not something he did, something he didn't do. Then we talked about like Shvuat Eidut, like someone you have a Eidut and you're not giving it or something like that. So the whole question is if you might have a conflict of interest. In other words, you were supposed to tell somebody that I know this person who's being investigated, and you didn't say it, and it might relate to the trial. So there's a whole question of what level of guilt there is in not in doing something, but in not doing something. So the whole point I tried to make last week was that in the Korban Chatat in chapter 4, the emphasis was, if you did something b'shogeg, unintentionally, v'asam, but you did something. Those all chapter 4 were cases where actually did something, where the cases in chapter 5, which are a little bit different and don't have as much, the Korban has different options and things like that, are cases where you might not have done anything, but you're being punished for not doing something. You promised to do something, you didn't do it. Or you heard you could have given witness and you didn't give witness or something like that. So it's just interesting that there was like a real discussion to this day, the level of guilt between actually doing something as opposed to not doing something. Both can be wrong, but there's different levels of guilt. I mean, that was just something I noticed on the news this week that was interesting. Now we get to work. Um, our topic last week was the Korban Chatat, and we talked about two possible ways of understanding the word Chatat. The classic understanding, atonement for some type of sin. You did something wrong and you have to clean away that sin. Or the other possibility, just a type of cleansing and purification, even though you did nothing wrong, just a type of preparation for encountering God, like what happened at Mount Sinai. So I want to show you this in the context of what we're going to talk about today, which we're going to focus on the 7-day Miluim ceremony. Let me explain to you where it's coming from and why I'm using it, not just to study that ceremony, but to show how that ceremony is going to be sort of the introduction or the setting the stage for the rest of Vayikra, for the next several chapters of Sefer Vayikra. I'll explain what I mean. I'll try to keep it simple. Won't be easy. Okay. Here's this is not the source sheet. I'll go to the top in a minute, but here's our basic outline of Sefer Vayikra. We gave a shir on the voluntary offerings. Remember, the first topic, chapters 1 through 3, one big unit. They're not obligatory. They're what's called the dava. They're voluntary, and then the mandatory offerings were chapter 4 and 5. The Olan Shlamim in chapters 1 through 3 were like Mount Sinai, and chapters 4 and 5 were not you. They're mandatory, but they're not voluntary, and you have to do something wrong to be obligated to bring them. And we talked about the different cases in chapters 4 and 5. We briefly talked about chapters about the 7 days of Miluim, but our focus today will be on chapters 8 through 10, which is the 7 days of Miluim and the ninth and the eighth day afterwards. And then the whole section that follows from chapters 11 through 15 through 16 is when man can or cannot enter the Mishkan. I want to try and focus how they're related. But the first thing I want to do is point out that the 7 days of Miluim is very unique in a special way. Let me stop the share for a minute. We know that the Mishkan has a very heavy focus in Sefer Shmot. From the time we get to Torah Har Sinai, right afterwards, after Mamad Har Sinai, we have the laws of the Mishkan in Trumat Tetzaveh, Hef of Kitisa, chapters 25 through 31. Then we have the story of Chet Egel, and then we have building the Mishkan, chapters 35 through 40. Like a big chunk of Sefer Vayikra, like the last third, is primarily the Mishkan. Now, we also have the Mishkan in Sefer Vayikra. The question, what's the difference between them? And the 7 days of Miluim will pretty much highlight the difference. I'll just spill the beans in the beginning and explain why it's important. Sefer Shmot is about building it, and Sefer Vayikra is about using it. That's the focus of Sefer Shmot is building the Mishkan, and Sefer Vayikra is using it. Now, the 7-day Miluim inaugural ceremony, would you consider that building it or using it? Do you understand my question? I hope someone want to chime in. Hope my question is clear.
Yes.
I want to suggest that Shmot is focusing primarily on the commandment to build the Mishkan and building it, where Vayikra is how to use it.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the purpose of the 7 days of Miluim?
to get it up to speed, to use it to break it in, so to speak. You
Okay,
know,
but
dog
Practice.
year,
It's
right?
to practice.
yeah, it's practice. It's inaugural, but
Hmm.
it's not official yet. So from
Correct.
one perspective, I could understand it as part of building them. On the other hand, you're actually using it. So it's really interesting. The commandment to do the 7 days in Miluim, we're going to find in Sefer Shemot, but the actual execution of it is going to be in Sefer Vayikra. And let me show you something. I have a little, this is, those were in the class last year. Was it last year? Yeah, last year we did Sefer Shemot, I think. Yeah, we're going book by book at a time. So let me show you something. Now we go back to the beginning of our source sheet today and go back to the top. We need that at the end, I think. Okay, taste share number 4. On the source sheet I sent out, I think by mistake I wrote share number 5. Just a little typo. But I redid this one for 4. We'll fix the one on the website later on. It's just the number on the top. We're going to focus on dedicating the Mishkan in chapters 8 through 10 and how it sets the stage for Vayikra. Okay, so last week we spoke the Korban Chatat, and we're going to focus today on the Chatat and Olah as a duo. In other words, we have Chatat by itself. Today we're going to talk about the duo, Chatat Olah, when they come together. And is that because of some type of transgression or has nothing to do with transgression? And our discussion will begin with the 7 days of Milim, which will set the stage. Now, in Sefer Shmot, just a quick review of chapters 25 through 30, 25 through 29, and then 30 and 31. In 25 through 29, we have what's called the Shekhinah unit. It began in chapter 25 with the vessels in the Kodesh Kodeshim and the Kodesh. In other words, the Aron, Shulchan, and Menorah, all made out of gold. That's the first section. That's all chapter 25. Then we have the structure that encases it, or what's called the tent of meeting, which is the Yuriot, the blankets that cover it, and the Krashim, the poles that hold it up, and the Prochet, the curtain that divides it. That's all going to be chapter 26, nice and organized. These are all commandments to do it. Then we have the Chatzer, which has the outdoor altar where you burn the sacrifices, and the that's the Mizbach Olah, made out of copper, of course, and the courtyard outside of it with the poles and holding up the curtains around it. That was chapter 27. This was all chapter 27. And then chapter 28 were the Big Day Kuna, the special clothing uniform that the priest had to wear, especially the high priest and also the regular priests. And then we had in chapter 29 was the 7-day inaugural ceremony, which is our topic today. And then we have the Olat Tamid that will be brought every day afterwards. Then that was the grand finale of the Shekhinah unit. And then starting in chapter 30, we had the leftovers. That was the whole topic we talked about last year. The Mizbach Torah. Once we have got Shekhinah, we need protection from the Shekhinah. So we had the Mizbach Torah and 6 Torah Parshiot, each one with its own dibur, about collecting money for kapara, the Machzit shekel, the cure to wash hands before you go to the altar, the anointing oil, the Torah itself, baking them, and Betzalel the builder in Shabbat. That was all the sort of peripherals at the end. Now, everything that's commanded in Truma Tetzav in chapters 25 through 31 is going to be done in chapters 35 through 40. In the meantime, we had the story of Chet Egel placed in between. But the only thing missing from that is going to be the 7 days of Miluim. I'll just reveal what happened. The order, no, it's going to be the same content, but shuffled around in a more practical order. Remember, this order is thematic, starting with the Shekhinah and then protection from the Shekhinah, starting with the Kodesh Kodeshim, the innermost sanctuary, what has the Luchot, the symbol of the covenant, called the Luchot Abrit, and then everything around it. But it goes in logical, thematic order. Where this is going to be building order, very practical. So the first one in chapter 35 in Parsha Vayikra was don't work on Shabbat, and a list of what you have to build. Then we got the builder Betzalel. Then first you make the tent, and then you make the vessels that go in the tent, and then you make the Chatzer with the Mizbeach in the middle. Then you have the priestly garments, and then you put it all together. Of all those things, the only thing missing is going to be the 7 days of Miluim. Notice everything in Truma Tetzaveh is repeated except for the 7-day inaugural ceremony. Where do we find it? We're going to find it only in Sefer Vayikra. Now the wording, I just want to show you something from regular Chumash, which I'll highlight it. Just there's a phrase. Where are we? Let me stop this share and open up a Chumash. Anyone who studied Vayikra Pekudei, it's a little, very not a little. It's super repetitive. What happened here? Okay. Oh, share. Here we go. No, we don't want that. We want a Chumash. That's what we want. But I'm going to use just the Hebrew one. because it's much easier to see with, here we are, Vayikra. Okay, there's a phrase here. Actually, I'll start with Shemot. Let's go back to Shemot. That's not there. Shemot, here we go. Shemot and Mufsak. Just take a quick look in chapter 40. The phrase that repeats itself like who knows how many times. Everything ends with Vayas Kashir Tziva Hashem et Moshe. And when they put it together, Kashir Tziva Hashem et Moshe. And then Kashir Tziva Hashem et Moshe. Remember, every parsha ends with the same phrase as God commanded. Remember this phrase, Kashir Tziva et Moshe. What's being emphasized when we put the Mishkan together is everything's done. Kashir Tziva Hashem et Moshe and Kashir Tziva Hashem et Moshe every single time. Okay? And then finally, Vayikra Techatzer, Vaycham Moshe et HaMelacha, and then finally the Shekhinah returned. That was chapter 40. Back in chapter 29, you had the same thing. Okay, there should be the Kodesh Kasher Tziva Hashem et Moshe, and every single phrase, every single Beged Kuna ends with the same phrase. Okay, it could bring another 20 proofs, but every single parsha ends the same way. Now I'm going to jump ahead to Sefer Vayikra. Back to Vayikra, here we are. And in Vayikra, in chapter 40, in chapter 8, we're going to do the execution of the 7 days of Miluim. And God tells Moshe, Kach et Aaron v'et banav v'et ha'bgerim, etc. We'll talk about the parchatat, etc. And gather them all together. And what's it say? Vayas Moshe kasher tziva Hashem oto. Commandment, Moshe does it. Okay? And then what's Moshe say? V'yom Moshe el leida, zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem lasot. Here's what God commanded to do. See the idea of fulfilling a command? When we study this, we relate it back to creation, where God commanded and God executed. And now, as we're partners with God, we're in the service of God. Now God commands and we execute. So they put everything together, and here again, kasher. He puts all the clothing on the kohen. Kasher tziva Hashem et Moshe. You could do a little word search; you'll find it every single time. And then Moshe brings Aaron. They put all the clothing on him. Kasher tziva Hashem et Moshe. Again, I'm just trying to show you when you see this phrase used over and over again in Vayikra Pekudei, it's clear that thematically, chapter 8, the 7 days of Miluim, the execution belongs in that same unit. We'll do one more. Here, Kasher Tziva Hashem et Moshe. On this section, I can bring here Kasher. It's almost like a broken record. Kasher Tziva Hashem et Moshe. The whole style of constantly repeating everything you do is Kasher Tziva Hashem et Moshe. Here we go again in Pasuk 29. Kasher Tziva Hashem et Moshe. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing. And then I guess it's going to end. Yeah, here's the end. Vayas Aaron uvanav v'kol advarim asher tziva Hashem et Moshe. I probably skipped one or two. I probably got 10 times or so. I just wanted to show you that this unit thematically belongs with Vayikra Pekudei. Sefer Vayikra saved it. I mean, Chumash saves it for Sefer Vayikra. And why I wanted to suggest this is because the 7 days of Miluim, you can look at it from both ways. Because it's inaugural. If I go back and see how it was presented back in Sefer Shemot in chapter 29, here we go. No, that's Sefer Vayikra. In chapter 29, no, I lost it. Hope I didn't lose your screen there. In Shemot 29, listen carefully how it begins. That's why it's inaugural. Here's what you need to do to sanctify them in order to serve me. And then what's the korban? What's the famous korban? We bring a cow for a chatat, and 2 elim, we'll see, 2 rams. One will be olah, and the other will be what's called a prototype shlamim called Ela Miluim. We'll discuss them soon. And then some bread, wafers to go with it, and a whole ceremony, and some oil to sprinkle. That'll be the whole ceremony where we dedicate the kohanim and the mizbeach, and we sprinkle the anointing oil on everything. And there's a whole ceremony which is going to set the stage for the rest of Vayikra. Now, with that in mind, I want to pay attention now in Vayikra to, let's go back to our source sheet. Let's stop the share and go back to our source sheet. Where are we? Share and Vayikra. Here we go. Okay, so that was the Mishkan here, and that's the Mishkan in thing. And the only thing missing was the 7 days of Miluim. Why? Shemot is how to build it, Vayikra is how to use it. And the Miluim is the first time we're using it, but it's also part of building it because it's making the Mishkan. It sanctifies it, but it also is the first time they use it. Now, On that special day, there's three animals we bring. We just read them. What are the special korbanot during this inaugural 7-day ceremony? There's a part for chatat, ayola, and a prototype shlamim. Now, the question comes up, why do we need a chatat lola? That's where we ended last week's share. So Rashi's approach is, why does Aaron have to bring a chatat during the 7 days of Miluim? Sure, we remember. Because of Chet Egel. And which implies had it not been for the sin of the golden calf, we wouldn't need this chatat. The problem is it's recorded in Chumash beforehand, without going into that whole argument between Rashi and Ramban on when the commandment of the Mishkan was given, before after Chet Egel. But if I follow Rashi's approach, keeping Chumash out of order, then the logical reason for a chatat during this ceremony is because Aaron's sin, or the people sin with the golden calf. But if I keep it Chumash in order, or even if it's not in order, it doesn't mention the reason for the sin. I want to explain why. So why am I bringing a chatat olah? Now, if a chatat olah was only during the 7 days of Miluim, that's fine. Remember, our question was it atonement for sin or cleansing as preparation? Now, but we find this chatat olah combo. I'm hoping the word combo the right way. A combo, like a combination. But from now on, chatat olah combo. They always come together. And the question is why. Now, I'm going to make a note where we find them coming together. And then I'll show you something which I think is really key to appreciate the difference between the chatat olah and the chatat by itself. We'll get that in a minute. Okay? On Yom HaShmini, on the 8th day, which is the next chapter, which is a prototype for Yom Kippur, but on the 8th day, we have the same thing, chatat olah, but a chatat olah for Aaron, and also a chatat olah for the nation, which only happen again every year on Yom Kippur. So again, I find a chatat olah on a yearly basis, but because it's on Yom Kippur on a yearly basis, it sounds like maybe it does relate to sin. Now, but on the 8th day, there's also shlamim. We'll talk about them in a minute. Now, the Yoledet, that's a great example. The Yoledet, that's going to be chapter 12 in Sefer Vayikra, which is soon afterwards. What do we find? We find two animals, actually two birds. It's olah followed by chatat. Usually it's chatat olah. Now it's an olah and a chatat. Now, is that just technical or is that something significant? But the Yoledet brings two birds, an olah and a chatat, and that's it. Now, she could also bring, we'll see what another option might be, but she brings olah and chatat. Now, then we have the Metzorah. Now, I'll take a stop for a minute. Did anyone ever learn a commentary of why a Yoledet, why a mother giving birth to a child, why she has to bring a korban chatat?
Yes.
Okay, Ruth, you're smiling already. Yeah.
Do I have to say it?
This can only be answered by a female. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Males
All
cannot
right.
answer the question.
Right. So there are things that she has said during labor that she now regrets.
Okay.
Many things.
Yeah, that's it. Now, what leads the rabbis to say that? Because she brings a chatat. If you bring a chatat, it means you must have done something wrong. Like every child knows, if I got punished, it means I did something wrong. I don't know what I did wrong, but if I got punished, it means I did something wrong. Even though I know I'm right. Now, someone thought I did something wrong. Now, but then we have the Metzorah, okay? And here's a strange korban. First, he brings in Asham, the Metzorah, called Yasha Metzorah, after his whole, ordeal is over, followed by Chatat Olah. Usually Chatat Olah comes first. The Metzorah is interesting. First, he brings in Asham, and then a Chatat Olah. That's going to be very important for me for what I want to try and develop in a minute. There's first the Asham, and then a Chatat Olah for the Metzorah. Okay. Then you have the Zav. Remember, the Zav and a Zavav, that's when you have a not natural cycle of emission relating to reproduction. So the male is a Zava, but then a natural and a Zava is a female. But what do they bring after their cleansing, after the 7 days of cleanliness is over? They both bring a chatat olah. Now, which animals, birds, animals, we'll leave that alone for now. But the duo chatat olah, and what I find over and over again, in fact, if you notice, they're all the chapters that follow the 7 days of Miluim. Chapter 8 is 7 days of Miluim. Chapter 9 is the Yom HaShmini, the inaugural ceremony where the Mishkan becomes functional. And then chapter 12 is the Yoledet. In the meantime, we have other Tumah in chapter 11. We'll deal with later on. Chapter 13 is how you contract Sarat, leprosy. And chapter 14 is how you get rid of it. So there's a korban in chapter 14. Chapter 15 is going to be the Zav and Zava. Now, I'm going to stop here for a minute for those who didn't look ahead in the source sheet. Is there anywhere else in Chumash where you bring a chatat olah? Can you think of any other case? Anyone remember? If you said korbanos in the morning, you would know, but and not if you said it, if you studied it. And we just had daf yomi on his Makoman, but the main thing is we
On
finished
every
it.
chad, the tzibor brings both.
Oh, very good. So korban tzibor we have, which is interesting. Every korban tzibor, there's an olah, a big olah, followed by a chatat. Remember series chatat. But it's not chatat olah, it's olah chatat, and it's a big olah and a small chatat, and it's by the tzibor. It's korban tzibor. We have it in Rosh Chodesh and all the holidays. Every time we say Yalav. Now, when else? Also the Nisim. Remember, what did they bring? Remember on the when they dedicated the Mishkan, the Nasi, boy, they brought lots of animals, didn't they? They brought Nolah and a massive shlamim, but also a series of chatat. But it wasn't a chatat olah, it was an olah followed by a chatat. But primarily a big olah and a massive shlamim, because that was a kiddush. I'm talking about a yachid, not the tzibor, a yachid, an individual. Okay, I didn't think anyone would remember. Don't feel bad. Because it's in Sefer Bamidbar, but it belongs in Vayikra. Okay? You've heard of the Nazir? Then I'm going to let Baruch Hashem, we have the Nazir. Okay? And now there's two times when Nazir brings a korban. Let me see if anyone remembers before we go and read it inside. Okay? A Nazir is really complicated, remember?
Once he stops in case of somebody passed away or whatever, and he breaks his Nazirut, then he have to bring a korban.
Korban. Yeah. Okay, so the first time you have it, I'll explain again, like you said. If you take upon yourself to be a Nazir, so you have to be a Nazir for 30 days. That's the Stam Nazir, is 30 days. But if your 30 days didn't finish and in the middle you became Tameh, because a Nazir has very similar laws as a Kohen, you can't, how do you say English to Tameh? He can't come in contact with the dead body, but sometimes he has to, or maybe by accident it happened. And therefore, you have to start your count over again. But because he became Tameh, he has to bring a special korban. And guess what it's going to be? We'll see if it will be a chatat olah. We'll see in a minute. And when it's over, now continue. What happens when it's over? When he finishes 30 days?
Also olah. He has to bring also olah.
A chatat olah or just an olah?
Chatat olah.
And that's it? Okay,
No,
now it's really complicated. So here, listen. I just summarized.
It's more than that. More than that.
Okay, yeah, we'll see exactly why it's more than that. So now we'll take a look. Okay, hope you follow. This is a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. What happened here? Back to my source sheet. Am I in the right place? Yeah. So now in the Nazir Bamidbar, if you touch a dead body before the 30 days, you bring a chatat olah and an asham. Got it? Chatat olah and then an asham. It's almost the opposite of what we had before by Mitzvah. It was asham then chatat olah. Here's chatat olah then an asham. Okay, and then when it's all over, it's really you bring a chatat olah and then a shlamim. Now, is there any precedent for a chatat olah combo followed by a shlamim? Can anyone think of that?
No, I don't think. I think it's the only case.
The only case of a yachid.
The yachid.
Yeah, but that's exactly the 7-day miluim ceremony, isn't it? Remember, there's also tenufa, but if we have chance, we'll read it. When you read carefully, when the Nazir finishes his 30 days and completes it, finally, he brings the chatat olah and shlamim, and then we take the and there's wafers as well, and then you wave it on his hands and things like that. It's extremely similar to the 7 days of miluim. Now, someone think a little bit. Why would a Nazir, when he finishes Nazirut, why would his sacrifice not echo reflect? There's a better word, mirror. Why would they mirror the 7-day miluim of the Kohanim that made them Kohanim? Anyone want to suggest an idea?
Well, maybe because they're ready to rejoin the Kahal and serve Hashem.
As what? As Kohanim in the temple?
As purified people to serve Hashem.
As a member of a Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh.
Right.
You got my model? I think a model was key. In other words, what's the need if a Nazir wants to sort of restart his relationship with God? No, you need to do something to do a new start. I want to turn over a new leaf in life. Something happened. I need I can do. The people have these fasts they do, the cleansing fast and things like that. But in my relationship with God, I want to do a restart and rededicate my life to God. I'm going to do something. First, I need my 30 days of preparation, and then I'm going to do a ceremony very similar to what the Kohanim did during the 7 days of Miluim that made them Kohanim. Now, there's a lot of other laws of Nazir that are like a Kohen Gadol. Like, what's the tzitz called? It's called, remember the word Nezer? Yeah, and the Nezer of the Kohen. There's so many, and the laws of the Nazir are very similar to a Kohen. Now, he can't become a Kohen. Is there a Tanakh, in Tanakh, is there a Nazir who was Nazir from birth and became a Kohen? Almost?
Well,
Yeah, Shmuel pretty much, wasn't it?
Shmuel was.
Yeah. Shmuel was born Nazir and then became a Kohen.
But he was a Kohen. Rabbi,
And he acted
when
like a Kohen. No,
his father was a Kohen, so he was
no,
a
his
Kohen.
father was from Korach. Shmuel is a descendant of Korach.
Yeah, but so
He's a Levite, he's a Levi, not a Kohen. But he became a
Elkanah,
Kohen.
but how can he become a Kohen?
No, it says he was a Kohen. He was Machahen. That's exactly my point. He wasn't a Kohen, but he was a Kohen, meaning he served God in the temple because he became a Navi and led the people towards serving God. But remember, we'll see what he did. He brought korbanot on a mitzvah. He got the people that did tshuva.
Elkanah was not a Kohen.
No, he was a Levite. It's in Divrei Yamim. In I think chapter, it's in Divrei Yamim in the genealogies. It's there twice. But Shmuel is a great grandson of Korach.
Okay.
His mother makes him a me'il, a special me'il. He has a special beged. But he's an exception to the rule because he's the turnaround. He almost like Moshe and Aaron. Almost like Moshe and Aaron. Shmuel's turnaround.
That's what we said, Kabbalat Shabbat.
Yeah, exactly.
Moshe v'Aaron b'chanav.
So you see something with the Nizirut that's special, but I'm learning from the Nizirut what's the meaning of the 7 day of Miluim. Now, did the Nazir do anything wrong? Actually, he's doing something right, isn't he?
Yes, but he does both.
Now, he didn't necessarily sin, unless now, but the rabbis have to look for a sin. So what do they look for? If the lady giving birth said, "I'm not," swore and she broke her oath. So what might the Nazir be doing wrong? Everyone know the famous answers they give?
Not drinking wine.
God's giving you, not enjoying life the way you should.
Pleasures of life.
Take away from the pleasure of life. People love that one. That way they don't feel so guilty when they overdo it. Okay, but I'm not going to go there.
He's taking a step down.
Because he wasn't
Okay.
careful enough and he became Tamei.
All I'm getting at is I find a chatat olah in situations where I didn't necessarily do something wrong. Now, but every time you bring it, everyone's looking for something wrong. The same thing would happen with the 7 days of Miluim. Did I don't do something wrong? But it could be that we just need it for preparation, for just as a restart, or to rekindle your relationship with God. When someone, but just like the Jewish people had to do it, the Jewish people need to do it on Yom HaShmini, as a nation, and the Kohanim had to do it, to become Kohanim. And we're going to see the Jewish people do it every year on what holiday? On Yom Kippur. Now, what I want to do now, I just use the Metzora. Now, when he becomes Tamei, he did something wrong, then he brings an Asham with it. It's a Chatat Olah Asham. I'm sorry, he brings Asham. What was the order? Yeah, Chatat Olah and then an Asham. Now, I want to prove to you.
Rabbi?
Yeah, go ahead.
Get the word chatat and the word chet. Do they have the
Yeah, for sure. The same charge. But I'll go over what I used at the end of the share last week. I'm not sure if everyone stayed on because it was the last question. I showed you the Milon, the dictionary on Al Torah, where chatat is used in two contexts, both as a noun and as a verb. The chatei et hamizbeach, or a chet. The chet, it's in modern day Israel, in basketball, when you shoot to the basket and you miss, it's called lahachti. You know what I'm saying? He's not doing something wrong, but you miss. Yeah. You missed the shot. That's lachti. But
And,
But
uh,
also you say to clean, to cleanse also
yes, the
lechatei.
cleanse, when you disinfect a house, right? When you clean a house, it's called chitui.
Mhm.
When you use economica, what's that in English? Economica is called bleach. The bleach is called chitui. You do chitui with bleach. But cleansing something, and it has in modern day Hebrew, it has a double meaning. You can do a chet, and you can also do a. It can be doing something wrong, or it could also be. There's no doubt chatat sometimes means wrong. I mean, it's sin. That's for sure. Remember the peta chatat rovetz you had already by Cain. But lechatei now, how they're related? I'm sure Rav Hirsch talks about it. I'm just saying we find them used in two different contexts, even though they're related.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to show you something. I will show you inside. It will take a little patience, but watch. I want to show you in chapter 4 and chapter 5, when there's a chatat by itself, what's going to be the final phrase? Anyone remember? I'll spill the beans. Every time in chapters 4 and 5, when I finish the unit, it says, V'chiper lav hakohen v'nislach lo. Got that?
So it sounds like it's a sin, clearly.
That's right. That's in chapter 4 and 5. But every time we have chatat olad together in the 7 days of Miluim, what do we have? V'chiper lav hakohen, and what's missing? It doesn't say v'nislach lo. I'll explain that again because that's key. Here's what I want to prove, that I can bring a chatat and I didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but I need cleansing. Why? Because if you did something wrong, I need v'nislach, I need the forgiveness. And I'm going to show you now. But let me just show you what I'll repeat it again. I want to show you inside. I want to support my approach by noticing the difference between the summary pasuk. In all the cases when I have a chatat by itself, the standalone chatat, which is clearly he did something wrong. That's how they all begin. Nefesh ki yechta, remember, bishkaga, whatever it is. It's usually unintentional, or you could have been more careful or something. It's not a felony, but usually it's someone who could have been more careful, or something he thought wasn't so wrong. We talked about that last week a little bit between chatat and asham. But either way, every summary verse in that section is going to be v'chiper lav hakohen v'nislach lo. The Kohen does kapara, I'm purposely not translating. We'll call it atonement for now. And God will forgive him. And every time I have chatat olah, I find v'chiper lav hakohen, and what's missing? It never says v'nislach lo. Okay.
Good.
Okay. Oh, very good. Okay, Larry, for those Buffalo fans. Okay,
No,
now.
Is that
So,
Atat is not a sin offering, but a purification offering.
Pure. That's exactly my point.
But I wonder whether the nislach means, and he is purified, not.
He is cleansed.
No. So take a look here. No, I want to claim the cleansing is the here we go. The cleansing is going to be the kapara. We'll see. But here, let me show you. Go back to. I'm sorry. We need Sefer Vayikra. Again, I'm using it in a regular tap because it's easier. You know what? I'll do an English Hebrew one. I did enough Hebrew ones here. Let me go just open up a regular Chumash for you because it's easy enough in here, Leviticus. Look in chapter 4. I'm skipping the Kohen Mashiach because that's an exception to the rule. Bim kol dat Yisrael yishgu. Okay, that's the first main case. Okay, they sin and they do some of these mitzvot, and we bring what? We bring a par. The whole Eidah has to bring a par. Okay, and they have to do v'samchu. They do smicha. V'signei Eidah leidem. They have to do smicha, which includes vidui. Chazal understand Arosh Hapar. And they bring the Kohen. How's it end? Basir. V'asa lepar kasher sa par chatat. Can you say? V'chiper alehem haKohen v'nislach lehem. Who's them? The Eidah. Got it? Kapara v'nislach. Understand? Next case. Asher nasi yechta. Got it? The whole thing. What he brings, he has to bring. Remember, he brings the seir. Okay, we did the whole ceremony. It's a chatat. And what's it say next? And notice, remember we talked about last week. He shechs it the same place he shechs the olah, and it's a chatat. And then we have the whole ceremony. The last line. V'chiper lav hakohen michatato v'nislach lo. What's the exact same phrase? Even if it's shechatakta bishgaga. What's it say? V'chiper lav hakohen v'nislach lo. The next case, the chatat again, chatat yechid, but now a kifsa instead of a sira. V'chiper lav hakohen achatato asher chatav v'nislach lo. Got that? So In all these cases, I have kapara followed by slicha. I continue in chapter 5, and sure enough, what do we find? That better be here. Here. V'chiper lav hakohen michato asher chatav v'nislach lo. And if he can't afford that, he brings 2 sorim. What's he bring? V'chiper lav hakohen michatato. If he brings solet, v'nislach lo hakohen. V'aytal hakohen kemincha. Got it?
Can we
Now,
say that the kapara is the ceremony and the slicha is the result of the ceremony?
Usually kapara is putting the blood on the mizbech. It's called v'chiper. But here, look, v'chiper lav hakohen al chatato.
Yeah, but it's a ceremony.
Al chatato.
It's a ceremony.
Yeah, but the chet needs kapara, but also it needs slicha. But have the word islach every time. Now let's check Hasham real fast. Okay, Nefesh Kitamov, this is the Hasham. What's the last line of the Hasham? Here. Okay, Benatan to ala kohen, v'kohen yichaper la be'el Hasham v'nislach lo. Hasham the same thing. The next Hasham, the Hasham b'chiper la v'kohen, ashkiyato asher shagag, v'u lo yada. Remember? That's the second Hasham called Hasham Talui. And then we have Hasham Gzelot, the whole thing. And guess what the last time is going to be? So every single case in chapter 4 and 5, we have kapara and slicha. And Chazal understand usually smicha or vidui. The actual vidui mefurash was here in the beginning of chapter 5. It said here, somewhere it says here, vitvadal chatato. Better still be here. Okay, there's over here somewhere. Okay. Remember Shvuot they do in Shvuot bitui bitvada sherchata aleha. And Chazal learned from this vidui. Here, this has vidui. The others have smicha. They say it's they learn one from the other. Right? That's the birash halacha of chachamim. Now, if I compare that to let's jump ahead to chapter 7. Chapter 8, where we have the 7 days in Miluim. What's it say? He brings all the korbanot. And what's it going to be? He'll take the korban. Let me check it. He brings the parchatat, he does smicha, he shechs it, etc. And it brings the ayil, the whole thing. Where's the summary pasuk in a second? Vayishchat, Vayikra b'nei Aaron, Vayiten al-kol v'avam. And here, everything is kasher sivashav and Moshe. And here, I'm looking for here it says the chaper alechem, but there's no slicha in this whole chatat. But I'm just looking for the word kaper. I had it before. It better be here. If somebody can find it for me, fine. But if not, you'll take my word for it. They bring the par.
Verse 15.
Verse 15. Oh, the chaper alav, okay? Vayikra the chaper alav. That's fine. That's when he shechs it, and he takes the chelev and par, he sends it out. Vayikra b'ta ayil v'samchu b'nei Aaron. Everything here is kasher sivashav and Moshe. That's right. Okay. But again, there's no slicha in the whole section, but we have kapara. No. Then in chapter, we'll get it in chapter 8 in a minute. Now, I was just looking for one more. But here, remember the dagesh was kasher.
Like 34. 34 you had.
34 also the chaper alehem. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, but again, what's missing, there's no kapara. But here, the main thing I want, that's the
No
7 days.
slicha.
But there's no slicha.
No slicha. There's kapara, no slicha.
It says kapara, no slicha, correct? Now, let's get to Yoledet. Okay, Yoledet is classic, isn't it? Uvimlot Yimei Torah, chapter 12, Leben or Labat. She brings the keves bet lo olah, and Yonah Torah lachatat, apetach hamoed. B'krov ze Hashem b'chiper aleha, v'tar min kordameha, zot Torah Yoledet. Vimlot timtza yada, teiseh b'lacha shnei torim shnei b'nei Yonah, echad la'olah v'echad lachatat, v'chiper aleha b'kohen v'tahera. What's missing? No v'nislach. Got it? So we have olah chatat for yoledet and no slicha. Okay, chapter 14, Metzorah, all the korbanot. That's what I meant to point out in these things. All through chapter 14, here, ve'ela kohen et olah v'temincha mizbecha v'chiper olah v'kohen v'taher v'imdalhu, etc. He brings two things, ve'vi, etc. He brings the whole thing and does the whole service. And how does it end? L'chaper alehem and v'chiper hakohen hamitaher lifnei Hashem. And that's it. Zot Torat Asher Neged Sarat. Got that? Now let's check in chapter 15 for the Zav and Zavah. You follow what I'm trying to prove to you? Consistently, I'm sorry for taking so long on it, but I'm showing you consistently, whenever there's a Chatat Olah duo, it never says V'nislach, it always just say V'chaper. Where in chapter 4, but it's Chatat by itself, it always says V'chiper V'nislach. Which allows me to differentiate between cases when I bring a Chatat Olah as a duo, as opposed to a Chatat by itself. So whenever a Chatat is brought just by itself, a Chatat, that's for a sin or some wrongdoing. But I can have many cases where I have a Chatat Olah duo, and even though there's logic to say something must have been done wrong, it doesn't say he did something wrong. And nonetheless, he brings a Chatat Olah, and it needs kapara, but it doesn't need slicha. Now, just prove it from the Zav at the end. Where's the Zav at the end? Here, v'chiper lav hakohen lifnei Hashem mizovo, no v'nislach. And then v'shaki tetzeh shich, etc. And then a Zavah, what's the last line? V'im Torah mizova, ki b'yom hashmini, she brings two Torim, or shnei b'nei Yonah, and the Kohen does achad chatat, achad olah, v'chiper lav hakohen lifnei Hashem mizov tumata. And that's it. She doesn't need slicha. So let me just summarize. And then we have the same thing up for by the Nazir for sure. He doesn't need slicha. Now let me close this up. Stop the share. Okay. Let me just summarize. All I'm trying to show you, and that's the key point I'm trying to make, is that I'm going to find numerous cases where in life cycles, be it touching a dead body, in one case, or having a baby, or having sarat, some skin disease, or for whatever reason, you need a timeout in your relationship with God. Due to life cycle reasons, diseases, whatever it might be, whenever there's a timeout, you need something for time in. And the thematic ceremony I need to do, the ritual I need to do, is the Chatat Olah. What set the stage for Chatat Olah? The original Chatat Olah of the 7 days of Miluim, which is basically making the Kohanim. Remember, this is what we do to them, and just like the Kohanim need a special ceremony to make them Kohanim to serve in the temple, the Jewish people need a special ceremony to be God's people. Now, if you as an individual have some life cycle, whatever might have happened, incident, right? That you have a timeout and for some time you weren't permitted to go to the temple for all these different reasons. When you come back, you need to do something symbolic, and it's the Chatat Olah. But the nation of Israel on the national level does it every year on Yom Kippur, which makes Yom Kippur. That's why, you understand my point, why the 7 days minimum sets the stage for the next section of Vayikra? Because just like, remember we talked in the beginning, it's called Torah Kohanim. The first half of the book will be Kohanim serving in the temple, and you come to the temple. The second half will be about Mamlechet Kohanim serving outside the temple, which will be Kedoshim to you. It's how we behave. But the need to do something symbolic to reestablish your relationship with God goes back to the 7 days of Miluim, and not necessarily because you did something wrong, simply because you're beginning a new stage in your relationship with God, that restart. Now, it could be the reason for the restart is because you did something wrong. But I'm saying you don't have to do something wrong to need that restart. And that's the question, do we need Yom Kippur, if we did nothing wrong? It's like only a theoretical case because there's no way we didn't do anything wrong. Just thinking we did nothing wrong is already a sin, even if you did nothing wrong. Now, back to so that's the case I tried to present today for the Chatat. And I got so much more to do now, but I just hope I didn't lose you. But I think that I wanted to prove to you that there's so many Chatat Olahs in Chumash, And it never says v'nislach, where every time there's a chatat by itself, it always says v'nislach. And they all have the chaper. And therefore, my whole point about kapara, we did last year on when we did chatego, kapara is protection from the Shekhinah. I needed protection so that you're worthy of encountering God. Now comes the big question: is the whole need for this kapara? Forget the nislach. Is the need for kapara only because of chet egel and the second luchot, or would I've needed it originally at all? Now, why am I saying that? We had Har Sinai. In Har Sinai, do we have a korban chatat or not? When we got to Torah Har Sinai, what korbanot were there? We did this like 3 times already. What korbanot did we bring when we said Nasa v'Nishma? What were the korbanot?
Olot Shlamim.
Olot Shlamim and no chatat. No chatat at all. We have Olot Shlamim. Now, what laws came together with on the same day as Mamad Har Sinai? Parshat Mishpatim. Correct? Are there any korbanot in Parshat Mishpatim? No, just aliyah l'rego to be seen by God, but no korbanot, definitely no chatat. In the 10 Commandments, are there any korbanot?
No.
It says you can't serve other gods with korbanot. But when we said Nasa v'Nishma, we brought Olot and Shlamim as a nation. And that was big, and we sprinkled the blood. Remember the dam of the par? The blood of the par we sprinkled on the people when they said Nasa v'Nishma, and that was the dam of the brit. So the blood of sprinkling the blood of from the animal is symbolic of accepting a brit. Now, if you remember, we did this way back. About to prove, I don't have time to prove it, but you can prove that the laws of Sefer Dvarim were first given to Moshe Rabbeinu together with the 10 Commandments on the first 40 days on Har Sinai. How do you prove it? Just read Sefer Dvarim. Moshe says it explicitly. Now, does Sefer Dvarim talk about korbanot or not?
No.
Does it talk about a temple?
No,
Yeah.
no temple and no korbanot.
It talks about a
Hamakom
temple.
asher yibchar Hashem.
It talks about a temple and it talks about korbanot. It doesn't tell you how to bring them and who has to bring what, but it talks about them. In fact, remember, the Ramban proved beautifully that why do I need a temple? Why do you need Mishkan and later a temple? I don't leave Har Sinai, I take it with us. Now, visiting God at the temple is remembering Har Sinai. Now, this you should know because there's reason you should know it, reason you don't know it. Usually people know the first Aliyah, because we read every Monday and Thursday and Friday. Now, something like, I call it Shvi syndrome, something in the 6th or 7th Aliyah, no one knows usually. Now, but usually the first Aliyah everyone knows, except during summer vacation. Summer vacation, you have excuse. So in Parshat Re'eh, it's the first Aliyah, but it's at the heart of summer vacation. It's after Tisha B'Av, before Rosh Chodesh Elul. So you have an excuse for not knowing Parshat Re'eh. But I'll share with you Parshat Re'eh. I've got Chumash open right here.
Yeah.
What's God say in Parshat Re'eh? Where are we? We're right here. We have a Chumash open, but we need the wrong book. Devarim chapter 12. Remember, when you come to land of Israel, get rid of all the idol worship. Get rid of all the place of idol worship. Don't do that to your God. But where do you go instead? Don't replace their places of worship with worship. You can get rid of all their places of idol worship and all their altars. Don't destroy an altar of God. Instead, go to the place that God's going to choose. And what do we bring there? Listen carefully. Ve'vetem shama olotechem v'zivchechem. Bet masrotechem, bet trumatechem, bet yidrechem, etc. We bring olot and shlamim, but korban dava, got it? Anything you bring, and your firstborn animals, etc. So we go to the Beit HaMikdash and we bring korbanot. What are they called? Olot and shlamim. Olot v'zarach. What's missing?
Chatat.
No chatat.
Chatat.
There's no chatat. Okay, and then there'll be all these laws about coming to Hamakom Asher Yivchar Hashem, and it talks about it. And then again, it says later on. Here, but no mention of the chatat. And those laws were given out. Now remember, Moshe repeats them 40 years later, but he repeats what God told him 40 years earlier. So now, the question is, now all that changes with the sin of the golden calf. Now, is the chatat because of the sin of the golden calf? I want to claim no. But rather, once After the sin of the golden calf, the covenant's broken. Moshe has to renegotiate a new covenant that has God's attributes of mercy. Once I have God's attributes of mercy, what can happen? I don't get punished right away. I don't get rewarded right away. Right? And now my whole relationship with God has changed. And now, because it's no longer linear, it's no longer Pavlov's dog. Right? Our whole relationship with God, because of Midat HaRachamim, we know God can forgive. But I'm not sure if I did something wrong, but maybe I did. Beforehand, if I did something wrong, I get punished right away. Now it's a new game where I don't get punished right away. I don't get rewarded right away. And I'm living in this constant limbo. Am I deserving of my relationship with God? Am I about to get punished? What do I need all the time? Right? I need always to do something. Maybe I did something wrong. So what I want to claim is the whole concept of chatat is a result of not necessarily chet ha'ega, but rather the new brit, midat harachamim.
What?
Because it's a whole new relationship with God. That's my chiddush for the day, I want to claim. Okay? Now, the idea that God changes his relationship and has attributes of mercy, they're great because you can learn from your mistakes. But your relationship isn't so clear. Remember, Kilo Rani Adam B'chai? When you had Midat Hadin, when you got punished, right, with Midat Hadin, with everything going by a strict set of rules, your relationship is clear. The second you have Midat Rachamim, the whole nature of the relationship is different, and therefore the need for a chatat when you did nothing wrong, you might have done something wrong. You did unintentionally. Remember, you never bring a chatat for Mazid. In the case of doing, you can't do something. I know it's wrong. I'm doing it anyhow, and then I'll make up for it. I can do something wrong and think it's okay. That was the asham. I can do something wrong, didn't realize what I was doing. Remember, that was a chatat bishgaga. But I can never do something. I can't machalo Shabbos on purpose and say I'll bring a korban. That's what Yirmiyahu goes against. But I can, if in my relation with God, if I'm unsure, if I might be going, I'm straying a little bit. I'm not being careful. I need something to reestablish my relationship with God, and therefore, like I'm off the mark a little bit, and therefore I need to cleanse myself, not so much from sin, but just to recalibrate my relationship. And then it's a type of cleansing, and the kapar member allows you to come close to God, protects you from God's wrath, from getting immediate punishment, and that explained the whole Yom Kippur korbanot that we need kapara. Anyways, that's why I tried to get across. Let me go back to the source sheet because I want to prove it now from Yirmiyahu. Let me stop the share here. Any question real quick?
Yes, we only bring nationally on the holidays a single seir lechatat is brought only on Rosh Chodesh and the holidays. It's not brought tamid every day. It's not brought on Shabbos. It's only brought on holidays, that is, national gatherings. And then one is brought.
That's a big question. Why does the tzibur, why does the nation bring a chatat? Why do they bring a serizim? Now, the classic reason is because everyone's coming to the temple, it gets contaminated and needs cleansing. It's called Chazal usually say that I need the chatat of the tzibur for what's called tumat mikdash for kodashav, because everyone's coming to the temple, someone's bound to be tamei, so it needs to be cleansed spiritually. I want to claim that the chatat, the serizim chatat, on the national holidays, is because we gather, but we need to remember the sin of Yosef and his brothers and the reasons of sinat chinam. But that's a whole shit I don't want to go into now.
Why don't we just say simply that whereas a korban chatat is an individual thing, when somebody actually did something, but they did it b'shogeg, so a national holiday, there's always somebody that has done something wrong that they're not aware of. So
okay,
it's basically covering that base.
Yeah, that's the classic explanation, which is fine. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, but on those holidays, it's an olah and a chatat. It's not chatat olah, it's olah chatat. Yom Kippur is chatat olah for sure. But on the holidays, I can entertain a different reason for the series Mechad Chatat. Remember, it has to do with it starts with Rosh Chodesh with what it got Chatat Lashem. I want to leave it alone. Maybe I'll deal with it later on. We can deal with it in Parshat Emor when we have the korban that comes with the shtei alechem, with the shlamim. That's going to be the case that'll put everything together. Why is that korban and not in Pinchas? You're in a good direction, but we have to deal with it properly. Now, I want to support what I'm saying real quickly from Yirmiyahu. Let me go back to my source sheet. I don't think I'll get anywhere near done on my source sheet today, but here. Here. Now, if we go back here, remember we did the Nazir? So when the Nazir touches his dead body, he brings the Chatat Olah, but then in Asham, because of touching the dead body, because he didn't finish his Nazirut. But it happened by accident maybe, so it's not as bad. But then after 30, he brings Chatat Olah Shlamim, which is like the 7 days of Miluim. Now, and all the Muslim Midbar, as you mentioned, have the series in. See, we were ready for you. Yeah, but we're not talking about it now. Now, in our outline, what I tried to show you is that after we have the story of the dedication of the Mishkan of the 7 days of Miluim, then we have all the cases of Tuma and Tara and all the Korbanot that are Chatat Olah that follow the same thing. We have the Yom HaShmini Korban, which is Chatat Olah.
Yeah.
And all the Tuma and Tara.
Bubby had a terrible shot.
Okay.
Bit
We can do real quick. Wait, let me do a quick mute. Okay, sorry about that. Now, let me go back to my source sheet and real quick. Okay. We're not gonna have time to do this. I just want to share something from here. Yeah, that's the question. Is Chatat only Yisrael Chet Egel, or is it related to the renewed covenant after Atzil mercy? I'm not going to do when the story of Chet Egel happened. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. But we did that all last year, whether the Mishkan was before or after Chet Egel. I'm just saying that, and not because of the sin of Chet Egel, but the new relationship because of God's Midot of Rachamim. And I brought the proof from Sefer Dvarim with Olotechem and Zivrechem. Okay, it was all on the source sheet. Now, I want to end with Yirmiyahu. I think we brought this briefly in the earlier share. I don't know if we got this far in Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu is right before the temple is being destroyed. He's warning the people coming to the Beit HaMikdash and tells them, improve your behavior. If not, korbanot are not going to help. Remember, they're causing more harm than good. But he warns the people, if you don't improve your behavior, if you don't improve your behavior outside the temple and how you treat your fellow man and how you build your society, God's going to allow the Babylonians to destroy the temple. Now, they're bringing korbanot, praying to God, save us from the Babylonian and the army, save us from its destruction and defeat. And God tells them, don't pray. He says as follows, Kol Mar Hashem tzvot, Eloi Yisrael, olotechem tzvot zivchem dichlu basar. Take your olot, which are primarily just for God, add them to your shlamim, your zvachim, and just eat the meat. It's basically, I don't want your animals, I don't need the meat. Okay? Then he says, Ki lo dibarti et avotechem v'lo tzivitim b'yom motziotam mitzrayim al divrei lo v'samach. When I took you out of Egypt, and I brought you to Har Sinai, remember the day I took you out of Egypt, we proved was the day we said Nasa v'nishma at Har Sinai, when we accepted the Brit. Okay? In the 10 Commandments, and in Parshat Mishpatim, and all the laws we got on Har Sinai, God didn't command us all the details of Divrei Olav V'Zavach, which is, remember, the first 3 chapters of Sefer Vayikra. That's why I brought it then. Divrei Olav V'Zavach come later. They're not the reason for the covenant. They reflect the covenant. Once the covenant is established, a couple doesn't get married, so they give gifts to each other, right? They extend flowers after expression of commitment, but that's not the reason for the marriage. So the same thing, you need to bring Olav V'Zavach when you come to visit God to remember your relationship, but God didn't choose you because he needs a nation to feed him. God needs you to come to visit to remember your relationship, and when you come, don't come empty-handed, and therefore bring an Olav V'Zavach, because that was considered something important back then. But what did I tell you? Listen to my voice. That was Har Sinai. I'll be your God, you'll be my people, and how you act. And go in the right, proper way, which I'm commanding you, the way of God. We saw last week's Parsha, or in Parsha Vayikra, to do tzedek and mishpat was derech Hashem. But you didn't listen. You went in your bad ways. From the time you left Egypt, you've been going astray, and therefore, I'm not allowing you to continue to bring korbanot because they're causing more harm than good. Because if that's all you're doing, and your sacrifices don't change your behavior, and they replace good behavior, they cover up bad behavior, then you miss the whole point of the temple, and therefore I have to take it away. And that's Yirmiyahu's message of korbanot, just as Yeshayahu as well in chapter 1 we know. Now I just want to end with a song we all know from the Haftarah that we read on. I think we read this on fast days, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, Isaiah 56. Even foreigners who want to join God to serve him, who love the name of God to serve him as well, keeping Shabbat, etc. It says, "V'aviotim ahar kodeshi, v'simachtim beit tefilati, Olohem v'zivchem l'rotan b'zmechi ki beiti beit tefillah k'rei l'chol hamim." When the temple becomes a place for all nations to serve God, the song we all know, we sing on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur all the time, by For Shema Koleinu. So the idea, it doesn't say you come to bring Olah Shlamim et Chatat. You follow? It says Olotechem v'zivchechem, which reminds us of Har Sinai. So Olah and Shlamim, that's the ideal. That's Har Sinai, that's the perfect relationship. But once we have God's attributes of mercy, now, in special cases, I need to bring a Chatat, but it's to recognize I did something wrong, maybe to remind me to learn from my mistakes, but it's also a type of cleansing and preparing you for an encounter with God, protecting you in that encounter in case you do something wrong, if you're not so perfect, as long as you recognize you can learn from your mistakes. So I'm saying that the Chatat Olah Kambo is going to be modeled after the 7 days of Miluim, which made the Kohanim, which makes Am Yisrael Mamlechet Kohanim in our personal lives. We have it every year on Yom Kippur, and that's going to be the meaning of course, the main thing I want is God doesn't need to be fed. We need to do something symbolic, and the symbolism is in which specific korbanot we bring. The blood of Parim was when we said Nasa V'Nishma. The Ayah was, remember, the Akedah story. I said the 7 Kvasim probably is the story of Avram and Avimelech. And the Sir Chatat's got to be Yosef and his brothers. Again, we can go through all the different animals. It goes back to Brit Bein of Tarim, the animals from there. The same animals are korbanot. So when you know the stories of Chumash and the animals described in those stories, then when you bring a korban, they remind you of those events. But the idea that you can bring an animal and appease a god and get away with murder, that was classic idol worship. And God's saying, so you need to have a temple in ancient times and do some ritual. But when it's misunderstood, that causes more harm than good.
Could the identification of Yitzchak as an Olah by Avraham Avinu have been the Miluim of Har HaMoriah?
It could be. That's the Akedah. The Akedah is such a complicated story and how to understand it that every year I change my understanding of it. It gets complicated. So a lot of people hold. I need the Akedah story to tell you God doesn't want sacrifices. It doesn't want human sacrifices, at least. And but you have to feel as though you're willing to, but you don't. So you bring an animal instead. Now, it could be the Akedah story gives us an understanding what the essence of korbanot are, that the willingness to serve God, but the ayil, an animal sacrifice replacing,
But Yitzchak was the Olah.
Okay, but that gets a whole. Again, I don't want to get into the Akedah topic, and I have to finish up now in a minute anyhow. And Rabbi Jay needs to make announcements. Okay, no announcements, Rabbi Jay?
I was only going to announce that Ruth Shane is giving the Parsha Shir this week since she's online.
Okay.
But all the announcements I made already. So, okay. And then I would tell her privately that I can't come because we have parent-teacher interviews this week, which I think happened also before when she signed up. But that's not me. That's you signed up for the week, parent-teacher. So I'm sorry for the interruption. Now you can go back and finish. Okay.
So, Rabbi Jay, I didn't give a shir this week in the shul in Alon Shvut, the new shchuna. So there's Rabbi, because Yoni Grossman was in the shir. Rabbi Rimel, there are all these people listening. But the title I gave was Shnei Masar. There's not much talk about in Chayesara, but Martha. But I did Shnei Masar Lemi. 12 children. Lemi. Who gets 12 children in Chumash?
Lots of people. Lots of people get 12 children.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I try to explain why why I call it Sipurei Saba. Sipurei Saba in Sefer Bereshit. But knows why. Terach has one child with 12 kids. Avram has one child with 12 kids. Yitzchak has one child with 12 kids. Remember each one. And they're part of Todot Terach, which is parallel to Todot Noach. Noach and 3 sons. It was a whole fun share. So it was but that was a lot of fun. But its titles are always cute. Okay, so we'll stop here and we'll and B'yir Hashem next week we'll go back to, hopefully it'll be a little simpler, but I'll finish up the first half. I did go back and do what the word Torah means in chapter 7, in chapters 6 and 7, Parshat Tzav, and use that to explain the rest of the first half of Vayikra and why things are out of order.
Menachem, Toby Singer has a question.
Toby, yeah, go ahead.
In the chat, you can
On the
see.
chat. Let me see.
I can just unmute and then just
Okay.
tell you it.
It's baseball strike at the top.
I was confused
Okay.
about like the explanation you gave of it seemed you were suggesting that God's attribute of rachamim, all of a sudden came into existence or maybe just manifest only after the golden calf. But I thought
that's
didn't he
That's like
always had midat harachamim, but he was
no.
explaining
That's
it at that
bullshit.
point. It's
No.
not like all of a sudden, okay,
Rachman.
now
No,
he
God-
has rachamim,
God's-
and so that you're
No,
punished
attributes-
differently or
no.
something.
Attributes is a function of relationship. No, attributes is not, God always has rachamim, but
Right.
in a relationship, you can be more strict. So like a boss in his office, I can be a strict boss or a strict parent or a nice parent, the same parent, but what tools am I using to accomplish my goal? So God has attributes of mercy, but in his covenant with the Jewish people, the first covenant was only din, was super strict because it's such an important job. God announces attributes of mercy after Chet Ego in the second covenant in Luchot Hashnim, which is a whole new relationship where God's Chanun V'Rachum, etc., which leads to a much more complicated relationship. But God was always Rachum, but in his relationship with Am Yisrael, he wasn't in the first Luchot, only in the second Luchot. But to appreciate them, I needed the first Luchot. That was the whole thing we did last year with Chet Ego. But I'm saying attributes is a function of relationship, and that's to do with the whole idea of the Brit. And Korbanot in the big depth, because once you understand everything relates to Har Sinai, so it makes perfect sense why all these elements of Har Sinai and the Brit at Har Sinai, and that's why the Mishkan is only built after Chet Egel, after God's Midot of Rachamim. And that's why we have to build the Mishkan to be worthy of God's Shekhinah to come back. So we'll put those together next week. I told you my line, whether about God having emotions. So of course God does have emotions, but he gets really angry when people think that he does have them. Okay. We describe God's emotions so we can relate to God, but we don't know what God is. We know that he is, but we describe in a way that we can relate to him. Okay, so we'll stop here for the third time. We'll stop. And Jay, no more announcements?
Strike three. Well, for those who don't know, Dr. Benny's not giving this class today at 1:00. Just also announced. Yeah, I forgot to announce that before, but that's it. Otherwise, tomorrow, of course, we've got our triple header Monday. Tamar Weissman at 11, Tzvi Grumman at 1, and Mark Spirit at 8:30, all times Eastern. And we've got all our 11 shiurim this week. So look forward to learning you and invite a friend, and everybody should be well. We should hear good news, and Shavua Tov.